It's the SDG Podcast. Before we get started, you can check us out on the web at solutiondesign.com/podcast or find us on all the social medias, LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Solution Design Group. And we're back for another podcast. First podcast of the new year. Happy New Year, everybody. I hope your holiday was excellent.
You too.
Happy New Year.
I still have my decorations up.
That's just because you're very festive, Chad.
Yeah, you have till July.
Yeah.
So you're good.
Yeah.
Today we're going to talk about planning. And before we do that, let's go around the horn and introduce ourselves.
Hi, I'm Els Tahura.
I am Chad Jetner.
Hello, I'm Peter Lawrence.
And I'm Kyle Bacher. And I am the worst planner in the history of planning. I love winging it. But we're going to talk about planning. So.
This is going to be an intervention to teach you how to plan. Is that what?
Yes. This is where you convince me to plan more.
Or
Yeah,
we go the
plan ahead
opposite
of time.
direction and you convince us why planning is a terrible idea.
Right. Yeah.
So,
It's,
Kyle,
it's-
as a terrible planner, have you ever planned something and had it work out well?
I plan in my head, like I don't wing it the day of, but I kind of piece it together over time. So I start with a kind of this blob of ideas and then I hone in on it. But when it comes to like doing work in the past for customers, then I plan.
Did we plan any New Year's resolutions?
Oh man,
Is that the
Like-
worst form of planning or the best form of planning?
I don't like New Year's resolutions and I don't really set them. But I find that I get energized to like do more after the new year. So that helps. Like it's motivating that it's a whole new year and I got big ideas and things I want to do. And
Is it the 4-day weekend?
yeah, that's really what does it for me. It's my time to rest and reflect. Goals.
What
Like
4-day weekend are you
objectives,
talking
like
about?
all that stuff. Do you do all that? Strategy, tactics, like as part of your planning? Like, what do you plan for?
Career-wise? Or
No, let's say a project. Like you're gonna plan, get a project plan together. Is that the same? I don't know how it works in Agile.
Oh, we're actually okay. So I do so every 2 weeks I kind of put together a plan for a sprint, for a whatever, right? I plan out and kind of talk about just what's going to happen for the next 10 business days or whatever, right? And we do that on a lot of the projects I've been on. It's been collaboratively.
I was going to say the team helps figure that out, right?
Yeah, like everybody kind of gets a say. It's not really a democracy, but it's like a representational republic. Am I saying that right? Where like,
Yeah.
One guy's not going to know everything, but you might have a plan for, so like the way, if I'm starting a greenfield project, right? What we plan for is lots of things, right? Tech stack. We plan kind of hierarchically. Here's what we can get in place now. Here's the building blocks we can put in place. Here's all of the blockers for the stuff that really needs to happen. We kind of I use mind maps a little bit, but not like really. I just like on a whiteboard, right? So here's what we're building, and then here's how we facilitate this feature and this functionality and this platform and everything else. And then we break that down into the smallest possible unit of work, circle it, That's a story. That's a thing that somebody can work on. And we put all of those in a backlog. We put the backlog into sprints. And then when a sprint comes into this time window, we say, okay, here's what we're going to work on. Does it still make sense? Is there stuff that we need to pull ahead? Is there stuff we need to push out? Do we have enough work for everybody? Do we have too much work for this time window? Everybody gets involved in planning the size of a story, all of the unknowns. It's a fun, right?
Your description of what you do and planning and all that stuff, that's like a Udemy video right there. Just that little blurb of what you talked about, what you talked through, that planning as you go, the 2-week chunks, breaking things down. Like I think that's a perfect recipe, the collaborative stuff. Because in the past on projects I've done, it's like you sit down at the beginning and go, okay, what are the tasks we have to do for the next 6 months? And that's when my heart would sink. And I'd be like, I can't predict the future that well. I'm just not, yeah. But you'd have to think it through and basically, okay, this is what I think we'll have to do. But all that, like, these are my estimates. You just got to do your best and then deviate when you need to. Like, I think you have to know when to abandon the plan or part of the plan.
Yeah,
you're going to be
Ellen,
changing it as you go.
You guys have seen this too, right? Like, it's hard if you're coming in on a brand new project like greenfield, nothing's built yet. It's a delicate balance between, like, you want to be able to show something in a demo at some point, but also
Right.
You don't want to get there too fast, because then you're going to build something that you're just going to rip apart later on, right? Like, I'm going to build up this screen, and it's going to be mostly mock data, and it's going to be mock whatever, and this might be static and that might be static, and there's a lot of throwaway code there. But also, like, you don't want to not do something demonstrative to folks because you want to show work, but it's hard to show. Like, it's hard to show on any project, in any plan. It's hard to show the first, like, 3 months, right?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, like we have spun up our dev environment. We've planned our QA environment. Like, well, that's nothing to see there. What is the app going to look like? And when do we get to see the app? That's all we care about, right? That's all the business cares about. They don't care about the infrastructure and anything like that. They want it all to work magically and perfectly, but
I think kind of what we've been talking about is sort of two things. Like, when there's something that you want to achieve, or there's a goal, you start with the end state. What is it going to look like when this task is done, this app is done, this house project is done? And then you kind of walk back from there. All right, let's start breaking this into incremental chunks, so that I can make forward progress. Because I think the bad reputation that like New Year's resolutions get is, I'm going to go to the gym 5 times a week, and then I go to the gym 3 times a week the first week, and then I didn't make my goal, and so now I feel sad and I give up. Instead of it being, I am going to be in a healthier spot. I will be able to run a mile in 11 minutes, and building towards that, so that you're giving yourself space to actually realistically meet your goal. I think the other thing that Peter and Chad, you were bringing up too, is just how much a plan never exists in a void. It's always contextual. Like, do we need to get a POC stood up in order to secure funding for the real thing? Do we need to spin up a couple dev QA environments to be able to push water through the pipes of what a deployment process would look like? That you're always thinking about, like, Chad, your example was, when we're planning for the next sprint, we're taking into account, is this too much work for our current capacity? Do we need more variety in the work so that each member of the team has something to do? It's that is the part of planning that I find interesting, is that, okay, here's the end state, how do we chunk it up? And as we're trying to do those chunks, how do we take into account the context of where we are in the goal, where this goal is happening, who's involved in the goal, things like that. So yeah, I think that.
So Chad, as you're going through your, go ahead, Kyle.
I did a project many years ago, building a system to track a 5-year planning process that I am under an NDA not to go into for a very large organization in SharePoint, back with SharePoint 2007. So everything had to be, because there was all these teams, everything had to roll up and a dashboard in progress, and then how you walk through it. So I've seen this model of planning for 5 years of stuff. But it was almost so big and complex, and like you could never really apply it to anything I was doing, because I would.
And they often those 5-year plans often turn into New Year's resolutions, right? like in 5 years we're going to be here, and after the first 2 weeks you've decided that, oh, we're going to do a different business. We're going to, oh look, the sales of our widget line is taking off much faster than our what's it line. So whereas our whole 5-year plan was all around what's it's, but now widgets are taking off, and we need to somehow magically get that 5-year plan switched. And nobody does that. They just like, oh, well, we had a 5-year plan, and that's all we wanted. We wanted to create a 5-year plan.
And then if you don't reach that, because things have changed, the gut reaction might be, well, then that means our plan was a failure. When it's like,
right.
No, we were working down this path, and now we have new information, new circumstances that, yeah.
Some sort of worldwide pandemic hit, and we needed to change direction somehow.
Another purely hypothetical example.
Purely hypothetical, yeah.
Well, they
Which
did
I think is
5-year
what
planning every year.
Yeah. Yep.
So it was like, because you had to adjust, you have to course correct, and reality happens, surprises. I can't. Well, it's very difficult for me to plan out my week or 2 weeks, because I get interruptions on a daily basis of people that need help.
Sure.
Or last minute requests, things like that. That there's the must do stuff that, like, okay, I have to keep people working. Like, number one is you have to have something. You have to have something that works, that you can do your work on. So then it's drop everything. So I can't be too tied to like the plan or a specific schedule. But I have an idea of what I want to get done.
Right. You're more task based and interrupt based than.
But some
tactical.
of that, I think, is also something that I'm sure any of us have seen at our clients too, is a given project might have a plan with it, and it's assumed that all of everyone's time is going to be dedicated to that one project. Whereas, like,
right.
To take your example, Kyle, it's like, yeah, I can have goals of what I want to do, understanding that X% of my time will need to be available or will just be taken because of incidents that come up, because of people who need help. And yeah, you got to balance out that plans are good, but none of us are going to be restricted to one plan. That's not how humans or life works.
Still has to be reality based.
We actually take that into account in our plans.
Yes. Yep.
Right. So like, I occasionally have this discussion with various folks in an organization where, like, we do, I very much prefer this Fibonacci method of doing story points and assigning that to stories, those little nuggets of little units of work that we break down. And we tell folks, like, a developer is only productive for 6 hours maximum a day, right?
Right.
That, 25% of any developer's day is going to be spent doing random phone calls, random tasks, answering questions, doing something else. So we literally plan for a developer being 75% productive on good days, right? And that's not
Yeah.
even
Yeah.
that's not even the norm. I would say most folks, it's 50% of a day is actually spent in front of an IDE writing code. And then we build that in. And if we build that in right, then it leads to fairly accurate estimates usually, but not always.
No, and it usually shakes out over time, right? Your estimates on week 1 are not nearly as accurate as they are on week 52.
Yeah, I mean,
Although-
you have to. You learn everybody's cadence, and depending on where you are in a project, like you learn, oh, okay, this guy said it'll take a day, and well, that was a lie, and not a lie, but that was
Optimistic.
Yes,
Yeah.
I was incredibly optimistic, and if you have a lot of optimists on a project, you take that into account in your plan and say, optimism is amazing. We're gonna kind of give a little bit extra time to allow for reality to seep in, and you plan for it. Yeah.
And
So do you have more of a buffer then when you start a project, just so you can get a feel for, you go through that learning curve, get a feel for the productivity and all of that stuff?
I wouldn't call it a buffer, but it's more of a we know that the first 4 sprints are going to be guesses, right? So it's not
Okay.
necessarily a buffer, but it's like you just have that understanding with folks that, hey man, this is the plan. This is what we think. We'll get more accurate as time goes on. But
Well, it's like
any
the
volatility, yeah.
the Mythical Man Month book, one of the
Yeah.
the tech textbooks. Anytime you're Googling like, what should I read in tech? Like, you need to read this one. But just talking about how, there's a tendency to conflate estimates with deadlines. And like,
Right.
as you work more together as a team, as you get better in sync and you understand the work and you're just flowing better, those two may line up more. But at the beginning, you have to understand that, yeah, they could be wildly divergent, and that's unavoidable because it's just the process of people getting to know their new work, their new team, their new process.
Oh,
Yeah,
absolutely.
For me, I am just as embarrassed when I overestimate or put in too much of a buffer as I am when I underestimate, right? Like,
Sure.
if we say we're going to be able to accomplish this and it takes us an extra 2 weeks, I guess embarrassed is the wrong word, but I screwed that up and I don't feel
Right.
great about that. But I feel just as bad when I say, yeah, it's going to take a month and we're able to wrap something up in a week, right? Like, I didn't plan that super, super well, or I missed something, or maybe just I brought some of my own biases in to how something's implemented. So I thought it would be what, and whatever. But once you get comfortable with the team, which is what we're saying, that planning process gets so much it's like a riverbed. It just smooths it out over time.
And it goes faster, right? Like your planning sessions
Mhm.
at the beginning may start out with a lot of discussion and argument and, talking about how long this Fibonacci estimated story will take versus and that's where the Fibonacci comes in handy. Like, it's not, I'm going to get this done in 8 hours. It's, I'm going to get this done in 2.
Yeah.
2 what? Just 2.
Which, yeah,
Okay.
and I'd expect that's similar for you, Kyle. Just I'm thinking about maybe when you first started your role as consultant for SDG consultants and operations, as you like to put it, like that you weren't sure necessarily where your time was going to go or what goals you were going to be able to achieve because you didn't have a sense of what the workload was going to look like, and you're
I
better
didn't
at it
even exactly know what my job was going to entail.
yeah.
So it's like you kind of have like that's where you dive in to the pool and figure out how to swim.
Definitely.
And I've always been willing to do that. Like if you're not going to push me into the pool, I'm going to jump in and figure it out. And hopefully I'll survive. But eventually you get better and better at it. And I'm planning for one person. And so I think planning gets more critical the more people you have, because I think it's important for everybody to kind of understand the big picture. It's also important for everybody to have some kind of input. I've always had a problem with somebody else just figuring out how long it's going to take me to do something
Without asking you.
Right.
Yeah.
Which has happened. It's happened
Yep.
frequently. I've had a few fixed bid engagements and that were sized up by somebody else, and it was rough.
They were optimistic.
Very.
Well, and oftentimes, especially on sort of the bigger projects, sometimes it does come down to, before you get the big group together, you kind of have to estimate some things in isolation. But like, I think Kyle can do that in so much time, and so we'll put this number on it, and we'll see what Kyle does at the end, or whomever, right? Like
Yeah.
there are times where you do have to help estimate time for generic programmer 1 or generic
Mhm.
programmer senior or whatever. Right?
Yeah.
And yeah, I haven't probably been the person to put you under the screws for the project, but I certainly have estimated projects for other people that I did not do the work on. And as far as I know, it turned out okay.
I had a wonderful thing happen. I had a request to do something, and I was like asked if it was possible. And so in the course of figuring out if it was possible, I actually did it.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And I was done. I'm like, yeah, we can do it. And it's also done because as I was going through it, I just my prototype actually worked. So we're going to run with it. So if you plan poorly,
Yeah.
and I know I plan poorly. So when I have to suffer because of it, I kind of accept that. Okay, now I'm paying the price. And now I worked a 60-hour week.
There's 3 days in every day.
Yeah.
No, one of those days at least should be sleep.
Well, eventually.
So we've kind of been talking about project planning and stuff like that. But for certain tasks, you kind of have to plan as you go. Like in the data world, you have to map everything out, right? I mean, you can't just wing it.
You can. It's, I mean, that is where you
We've all
could
seen that
fall
design.
back on non-relational databases for having that schema flexibility. But yeah, you try to keep an understanding of where your work falls within the bigger picture and where you have leeway, so that, if I'm developing, a set of new tables and new integrations, and we think we know what it's going to look like, cool, we're going to do a first pass, and I'm going to build it so that I can alter it relatively easily. So I think I go into it, some people might call it gun shy or with conservative estimates, but it's just it's just coming from a place of, knowing that something's going to come up that we didn't know about, because as much as we like to think we know all the requirements out the gate, we don't. Things happen. And yeah, and so it becomes more about planning for initial development and then planning for kind of milestones where you can tweak a little bit. To just build in that flexibility and being okay with that happening.
Yeah,
Things are going to have to be fixed.
Yeah.
Early on in my career, I had a really bad habit of thinking I was done with something after the first iteration and then getting upset when I had to make changes.
Yes. Yep.
And it's like, once I moved that goalpost out to, okay, after all the iterations and like, I'm not done yet. Just because I start at the top of the page and finished at the bottom does not mean this is done. It's got to pass, through a lot of other hands and review and acceptance and all that kind of stuff.
Somebody normal has to use it and make it work.
Yeah.
Yeah. For me, I try to remember, like, my work is not done until at least one other person has had to debug or explain what bytecode is doing, like after it's gone to production. Like, cool. If someone else looks at it, understands what's happening, can troubleshoot a problem. All right, now I can breathe.
I can breathe. Nice.
Well, that's kind of the goal is, for consulting, is to put yourself out of a job.
Completely.
Yeah. You want to finish strong and then leave. And for the next thing and hope for the best.
Yeah. A lot of times we make a lot of really strong relationships and good relationships that are never easy or fun to quote unquote leave behind. And it's great to hear from people, but if your old client is reaching out because something you did they can't figure out, that is crushing.
They rarely reach out with good news and tell you how successful the project is still continuing to be.
Yeah.
Like, just wanted to let you know things are still going great.
Yeah.
You're not needed.
Yeah, you're not needed. We've got
you guys
this.
are scaring me. You say that doesn't happen?
No.
Come on. That's gotta happen. I'm sure that happens.
Hey, Chad, maybe you can break down that barrier.
I will try to break that. Yeah. Yeah.
Sorry, Peter.
Do we ever, is there a bad sprint plan? To even go further, is Agile the result of bad planning shortened up to fail fast? Or
yes.
is it, yes. Okay, done.
Next question.
I think it's the result of, and now the cause of, bad planning, right? Because everybody's Agile now, and now you can get a certification to be Agile, and you can get all of this stuff, and you can become a purist, and you can become so pure in the sprint and the goal of the sprint and the commitment to the sprint and everything else that you just kind of lose sight of 20 plus years ago when this was all new and the problem that this was supposed to be solving, right? And I've gone through this a couple of times where, all right, you guys planned for this. You didn't hit the sprint commitment last time. Maybe we should lower it by 20% this time. I'm like, or, we call an aberration and just move on with your lives, right?
Right.
It's Agile is a methodology that helps, a lot of things, but it's also a religion to some folks that has kind of the opposite it kind of has the opposite impact to the problem that it was supposed to solve. And this is me just getting my feelings out there because of a couple of.
No, but I
here,
think
Chad.
that brings up I think that brings up a good point. Just every planning strategy can be abused. Just there's
Yes.
not there's no way to plan or not plan that will guarantee foolproof success.
Even SMART goals.
I know. Even OKRs, KPIs. Let's throw some more acronyms.
Yeah, I don't think you can necessarily guarantee success, but I think you can guarantee like failure.
Yes.
Yeah. So what is the kind of the rule of thumb to avoid that? Like, how do you, like, what does doom look like? What does certain failure look like in bad planning?
I think absolutes, right? There's always those absolutes. This absolutely has to get done in 2 weeks. We've saved this one thing for this 2-week period, or for whatever reason, this thing has to get done. Well, okay, but does it? Like,
George Lucas said it best: only the Sith deal in absolutes. And they had a good plan for a while, but it falls apart eventually.
right.
I've seen the similar things, Peter, where it's like, hey, a sprint commitment is a sprint commitment. If you say you're going to do this, you're going to work as much as you need to get this done in this period of time.
Or
the
sprint goes 1 week longer now,
yeah,
so we can get done.
Or we just roll something over to the next sprint, right? Like, it's the work is just kind of a continual waveform that goes up and down and up and down and up and down. Implementing little time windows on it doesn't make it happen any faster. It certainly is kind of cute to report on some of that stuff, but
it's not a cool graph, though.
But yeah, goodness gracious, if you're reporting on a waveform at the bottom, yeah, it's going to look weird, and then you're going to get the other side of it the next time, and it's going to look great. And maybe if you just, to your point, I guess, expand it out a little bit, that'll be a nicer graph. But holy smokes, forcing folks to commit to a thing, yeah, timelines are great, but people are even, you're going to need people to commit to a time or to achieve a timeline. And if you force these weird little commitments based on arbitrary moon phases, you're going to lose people darn quick.
Well, I think you lose the plot when you move to Agile because that waterfall strict methodology like put you in a box, but then you go to Agile and then you do it at a much smaller scale at the sprint level.
Do the exact same boxing and poor project and estimating and all of that, but only compressed down to a 2-week chunk instead of 6 months. But if you do it every 2 weeks, it doesn't really improve the process, right? Like, and I think, like we've said, is Agile is, trying to get that plan shortened up so you can get an idea. But some people outside of the development team will take the best possible sprint result and extrapolate the rest of the project. We're going to be done in 6 months because this 2-week period where all the stars aligned went so well, we had no problems. Nobody went on vacation. We were all here. That's the one we're going to target. And then obvious failure happens later on.
Yeah, it's like not dealing in absolutes. Like that's one way to fail. The other way to fail is mistaking having a plan for achieving the goal. Like if it's just we spent 20 hours building this long, like 5-year plan in Microsoft Plan, this beautiful Gantt chart, that means it's done. Or that, that guarantees that we're going to be successful. It's like, no. A good plan, it basically gets out of its own way.
So what do you do to educate people that are not familiar with having, the flexibility you need to have where you're not, instead of looking at the end of the 2-week period and what you didn't accomplish and see that as a failure of some kind.
I mean, I think from the get-go, and this goes way back to the original Agile Manifesto, get everybody involved, right? The business doesn't get to drop in for demo days and that's it, right? They've got to be sitting down in all of the meetings, even if they're bored. That they need to play along and be part of the process, because they'll be able to identify things like, oh, yeah, we don't actually have that tool in-house yet. The contracts haven't been signed, and that's not going to happen for 4 weeks based on our experience. So you can't start that yet, or, anything like that.
I think the example that comes to mind, I think, echoes a lot, Chad, of what you were talking about, in terms of people treating certain methodologies like a religion. I've been on teams where the senior person is obsessed with velocity.
Yeah.
And
it's a number.
It is a number, and that number is the end all be all. And so it's been interesting to, in that situation, I wasn't in a position of seniority where I could just say, shut up, I don't care about the velocity. But what I try to do is have conversations about, here's 2 different sprints that have somewhat similar velocity. Tell me what does that tell us about the quality of work? How did that make a different experience for the customer? And I try to find 2 sprints that have similar velocity but very different contents. So here's one where we did 20 points, but 80% of those were bugs.
Right.
It's not good that we got 20 points worth of production issues.
Right.
So yeah, just trying, basically I try to acknowledge the problem with that person or that team by pointing out the dissonance between their assumption or their understanding and what, from my perspective, would be the more useful end goal.
Sometimes just restating somebody's opinion slowly,
yes,
and is really enough to change a mind, right? Like I've used that tactic a lot. Let me just, here's what I'm hearing, and then just walk through it. Is that what we're saying? Well, no, right? Because the well, no is them literally changing their mind in real time and coming up with a new plan. And then all right, now let's start over again. Yeah, it's not even a well, maybe it's a seniority thing. I've never really paid that much attention to the org chart or the seniority or whatever. I've always just,
been an anarchist.
I'm not going to say that, but I don't know. I think it's interesting though, the way some folks do get kind of entrenched in ideas and patterns and philosophies and everything. And the idea of, well, this is what's worked on this project, and not adapting to the situation that you're in,
right,
is one of the biggest planning anti-patterns I can imagine, right? Oh, this is what I've done on this last 2 projects, and I've said this before. I'm like, hey, I've tried this out on the previous project. We can try it here to see if it works, and if it does, great. If not, we'll throw the idea away. One of those ideas was, we're going to do a bug bash, right? No development. We're all just going to spend half a day finding defects, right? Great idea on one project, did not work on another one.
So how do you maintain that kind of positional awareness? like you kind of have to know where you're starting, and what you like, where you're
Experience
at.
helps.
I mean, part of it's experience, part of it is reading the room, which also comes from experience. But you know, you have to just understand and explain to people that everybody's different and every team functions really differently. Some of them really excel at one piece of the process, and others excel at other pieces of the process.
And it's emotional intelligence to recognize that, right? Like there's varying levels of empathy and emotional intelligence and people's ability to connect with a situation. And if you're really good at that, then you find out right away that, yeah, the stuff that worked successfully on my last thing probably isn't going to work here because, I don't know.
And to not be set in your ways, right? Like to not say, we're doing a bug bash. I've seen this work really well, and we will keep doing it until we succeed.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
yeah.
If we fail 10 times, eventually we'll get it right. No, the room hates bug bashes. They would rather fix them as they go.
So in the process of planning, you have to make decisions.
Yes.
I'll agree to that.
How do you avoid overthinking and decision fatigue? How quickly should you plan versus like really digging in and like spending a ton of time on it and trying to like perfect it?
It depends on the magnitude of the decision, right? I mean, if I'm going to spend $44 billion on something, probably going to think about it a little bit more than maybe, I don't know, other things. But if it's, for me, I mean, I go back to project work and starting a new project. And if it's architectural frameworks, if it's patterns, it's everything else. Sometimes I don't even have to decide, right? You go into an organization and they've got some standards and you can just coast on their standards. Well, not coast, but you can reuse their standards and you can base a lot of the structure of your architecture, the structure of your project, all of that around how they do things. And then you have, I mean, they give you a coloring book and you get to color in with your own your own experience. I actually have the opposite problem. Like sometimes I'm like, I wish I had more choices to make for how we're going to do things, right? Instead of being confined to, well, here's our approved list of vendors, here's our approved list of services, here's how you do this, here's how you do this. You just hook it up and then write, customizations where necessary.
Yeah, and I was going to say, like, if it's a foundational decision, something that whatever I decide now is decided, right? Like, I can't go back and change the underlying architecture 6 months down the road without ripping out giant amounts of code and process. But if it's, do I want the red button or the blue button? That's okay. We can rip that out pretty easily. I mean, obviously I'm not a designer or I wouldn't have said that, but that kind of level of decision where it's something that's at the end or on the roof or something that, we changed our mind. We'll just sweep away that little bit of dust and sprinkle some different dust back in.
Yeah. Like we make safe bets on big swings, right? Like foundational stuff. Like for me, I'm hey, how about we do this in Java and we use Spring Boot and we do, like these things. And then we kind of zero in on to the point where we can say, do you want that to be red or green? Or do you want, what color palette do you want to use? The Chrome is simple. The foundations of that, I always make very safe bets. And then we can get risky with, well, not even risky really, but we can get experimental with tactical frameworks for whatever your use case is.
Right. Or a calendar control or something like, oh, we're not betting the farm. This will be a great thing to have, and if it works, wonderful. But if it doesn't, we'll just rip it out and go back to deciding again. So, I think it's not really decision fatigue. It's more like, I've got a set of safe bets that I'm going to use as the underlying principles, and the rest, I don't even decide. Like I think I've stated on the podcast before, I've let coin tosses make decisions because they were that equal. Like they were close enough to being equal. Like, who cares? Let's just get a decision, write it down, move on. Oh, you didn't like the way the coin flip turned out? Okay, we'll use the other one now and we'll move on. And we don't have to get stuck on it.
So getting bogged down in perfection and what is the absolute best way
Never.
to do this?
Yeah.
Because the best way changes all the time.
Exactly. Yeah. So kind of calling back to the, emotional intelligence thing. I overthink. I know I overthink.
Oh yeah.
I have a shirt that says overthinking and also hungry. Like I know that about myself. And so for me, in terms of planning, I've had enough experience with myself to know that if left unattended, yes, I'm going to try to make the perfect plan that will fit for all time and every scenario and never have any errors, which is not a thing. It's just
with all the contingencies planned for, right?
Yeah, that is not based in reality at all. And so for me, in terms of when either I'm making a plan or I'm talking to someone else who's making a plan, it's just do it. Just start somewhere. If that somewhere doesn't work, you will know and you can adjust. But you're never spending too much time trying to create the perfect plan is just delaying the goal.
Right.
It's
I think
just do it.
You get in that, and that's where you get in the procrastination trap.
Yes.
Because you still don't think you have the perfection figured out. But one thing that really helps me with procrastination is open the app, like start, just get into it, start.
Yeah.
And then, after like a few minutes, then you're fine.
It sounds so easy when you're not in that procrastination loop.
But it's very hard in the moment. But yeah.
Kind of been in that, like, well, what if I do this? What if I do that? And you're right. You do tend to like procrastinate a little bit, and like experience tells you just start, pick one, go.
Yeah. Because you get stuck.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a lot of like procrastination is because of that. And so if you try to have the perfect plan, what's the saying?
It's dangerous to go alone. Take this.
Like Edward, yeah,
perfection is the enemy of the good.
Something like yeah. I
see that's more apt.
Yeah. What's a saying? Let's just throw it out there.
Everybody come up with a turn of phrase.
5 minutes left. And let's see if anybody has any parting thoughts.
Stitch it all together.
I planned to get all my Christmas shopping done this year, and I did not.
Now Christmas is over with, and now we're in the new year.
Yes, so. Christmas is obviously over with.
How did that work out?
It was great. Everybody loved the Amazon gift certificates they got in place of an actual gift.
The IOUs.
Everyone loved the little things at the gas station as you're walking out, the little pack of chapstick and the tire air pressure gauge,
Who
the air
doesn't use one of
freshener.
those?
I remember stores used to be closed on Christmas Eve, even. Like everything was closed. You couldn't do anything on Christmas Eve except go to Walgreens and get
That's
your
because you're
prescription.
old.
Back in my day,
We didn't even have snow plows.
Yeah.
We shoveled and we liked it.
It built character.
Peter, any parting thoughts about planning?
Yes, you should plan, but don't let it be the like planning is not better than doing.
Oh, Jesus. Listen
I
to
can't top
Confucius
that.
over here. All right, Buddha. that
get a
almost
t-shirt.
sounded like Buddha / Yoda.
All right.
No,
well,
the Yoda one would be like, do or do not. There is no plan.
that's right.
Uh,
Well,
I think
I
you're
can't
good.
top Peter's.
No,
yeah,
think
I was
you're-
going to say something actually smart, but
yeah.
not anymore.
I feel like
Wow.
I learned a lot today on the podcast. And I think with that, we should say goodbye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Goodbye, everybody.
Goodbye, Chad. Goodbye, everybody.
Solution Design Group is a digital product consultancy in Minneapolis. Check us out on the web at solutiondesign.com or look for us on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Instagram at Solution Design Group.